After you have finished coloring your insect, one last thing that I want to add is a cast shadow underneath the insect so that it looks like it's on a solid surface rather than just floating in space. So the way to go about that is you have to kind of imagine where the shadow would be, how far out would it come, and how are you going to go about doing that. One of the ways to kind of figure out where the edge would be is to kind of use the legs. So if you imagine where the leg, where you can see where your leg is attaching to the thorax, if you drop a line straight down and then extend this line at an angle, again, you're kind of going at that angle when we did these as a cube, kind of going across like this. Extend that line at an angle inward like that. Where those two meet, that would take the thorax and drop the edge of that. So if you had a perfect shadow, if a light was coming from above like this, you had a perfect shadow, that's where the edge of that would be. And then you can kind of just follow the contour. You can sort of do the same thing, with your other legs, or you can kind of just fake it, sort of. And you kind of come up with this shadow that mimics. Now, I'm drawing this out for you, but I wouldn't really do it like this. If you're going to do that, you can do it, but do it very faintly. And then you have to kind of imagine a line then going down the center underneath and going out the back. And this shadow, depending on what's happening with your abdomen here, does that go down and all the way touch the ground? Because if it touches the ground, your shadow would go right to that and kind of touch that. But if it's up in the air, your shadow would just kind of end out here somewhere. Whoops. Just hit my head on the camera. Sorry about that. And your shadow would end out here and maybe, do something like that. But I don't want you to make a real distinct hard edge shadow because if you don't do it just right, it can look off. So we're going to kind of blur the edge of it to make it more indistinct. And then the shadows from your legs will kind of go, inward, kind of almost like they're going towards the center. From the legs, kind of go inward. Like they're going in towards the center. They're all going in towards the thorax, I think is the best way to go about that. So as you begin shading, you just shade up, and you don't want to go too dark, because if we go too dark, it will make it look like your insect is right on the ground. Now, if your insect is sort of a, very, very close to the ground, then, or you want to make it appear close to the ground, then by all means, you can go very dark. So especially with the head, because the head is up higher on the thorax, the thorax might be closer to the ground, so it might be darkest right there. But then as you move out towards the head, as the head sits up higher, the shadow's not going to be as great, okay? If you look at my hand, maybe you can't see that too well. I'm trying to think of something else where you can see it. The closer, you all know, as the object gets closer to the ground, the shadow is darker and it's less distinct. The more you can kind of see how it blurs the further I get away, and the more distinct it becomes as you get closer to the ground. So we're going to blur that as we move towards the head. We're going to blur that out, and as we move towards the legs, we're going to blur. Okay? So, like I said, that's why I said don't make that outline too dark. You want it as a guide to know where to end your shading, but you don't want a hard edge through your shading. You just want to kind of blur that out. And same thing back here. Now again, if your tail is, your abdomen, I call it tail, the abdomen is actually on the ground and your shadow goes right to it, it will actually be a little bit darker right there and then get a little bit lighter, because again, this part, if it's on the ground, the shadow is going to be a little bit darker, and then it will get lighter as it moves out. And you really want to blur the edge of that, and be careful about not going out too far, because you want to leave room. And when you do your legs, it's going to be just underneath the foot or the tarsus. It's going to be a little bit darker, and then that will kind of fade as you go in. A little bit darker there. And just get that to fade to go in. So then you kind of, like I said, you create the shadow underneath, and it anchors, what we call anchoring the object to the ground. It creates the illusion that there is a solid surface underneath of the object upon which it is placed, and it's not just, you know, floating in space. Now, I'm not being real careful with my shading. I would expect you to be a little more careful with your shading. And just what color to use. You want to pick something, you know, that you've used one of your 4 colors for your shading color. And it doesn't necessarily have to be layers of color. It can just be one single color. I would take probably like your darkest color, your number 4 color that you used, to use as your shadow color underneath. And that's how you add your shadow.